Hi, I'm Dr. Renee from The Natural Vets. If you've had a look at our website or been into our clinic, you will know that we advocate for raw, real food for dogs and cats. We don't stock any dry kibble, and there are many reasons for that. And I'm going to run through a few of those reasons today and show you the differences between a processed pet food diet compared to the raw, complete diets that we recommend. So I've got an example of a kibble type diet with me today. It's the Supercoat, which is a commonly fed brand and often marketed as being optimal for your pet. And you can see lots of sort of pictures on the bag of whole foods and happy, healthy dogs, but when you dig a little bit deeper, you realise that this is basically just marketing. So let's have a look at the back of the bag, and this is what you want to be looking at if you're trying to determine whether a food is healthy for your pet or not. The main things that you want to check out are the nutritional analysis and the ingredients listing. And usually you can find these on the back of the bag, or sometimes they're on the side or the bottom of the bag or the box. So when you're looking at the nutritional analysis, it will give you an idea of how much protein, carbohydrate and fat is in the food. So this is a dry food which runs typically between 6 to 10% moisture. So if you deduct the moisture from the total as well as the protein and the fat and the ash if it's listed, you're left with an idea of how much carbohydrate is in the bag. And so if we do that calculation for this particular food, this food runs at about 60% carbohydrate. 60% carbohydrate is way too much for dogs, particularly when it's mixed in with the protein in a bag of food and it's cooked at high temperatures and pressures. It puts a big load on their digestive tract and it ends up causing disease over time. So how do they end up with that much carbohydrate in the food? When you look at the ingredients, and meat is one of the first ingredients listed. Well, let's have a look at that now. So if you read your ingredients, it says meat and meat byproducts, chicken, beef, lamb and or pork, and or poultry byproducts, whole grain wheat and or cereal byproducts, whole grain barley and or sorghum and or corn, fish and fish byproducts, tuna and or salmon and or vegetable proteins. Number of minerals are listed, some beet pulp, a number of vitamins, some garlic and rosemary plant extract, and they've even managed to slip the word natural in there because rosemary plant extract is listed as a natural antioxidant. And so you might read these ingredients and think, well, it's not too bad, meat and meat byproducts are listed first, and so there must be a fair bit of meat in here. But what they do when they're labelling pet food is this thing called splitting. And so you see that the second ingredient listed is whole grain wheat and or cereal byproducts, and then they list whole grain barley and or sorghum and or corn. And so if you add up all of that carbohydrate, cereal and grain based foods, it ends up with a very large proportion of carbs in this food. And the same thing applies to your grain-free food. So you'll find even your grain-free kibbles still end up with a high proportion of carbohydrate. It's just not in the form of grain. So it could be sweet potato, tapioca, corn, or other types of grains in that food. So that's one of the problems with dog and cat foods, is often they rely on grains as a cheap source of both carbohydrate and protein, because grains will have a little bit of protein in them as well. And so they use that as basically a cheap filler, but it's not a food that your dog or your cat is really designed to eat. And so they get away with that with your labelling, making you think that meat is the primary ingredient, but by splitting up the carbohydrates into number 2 and number 3, when you add those up, you've got a lot more carbohydrate than what you thought you did. The other problem with this sort of food is that it's very non-specific with regards to what they're putting in the bag. So they tell you that it's meat and meat byproducts, but they're very vague about what the quality of the meat is, what kind of cuts of meat they're putting in there, and even what it's derived from. They can't exactly tell you. So it could be from chicken or beef or lamb or maybe some pork. They're not quite sure. And that's because typically what's put into these kinds of food is rendered meat and meat byproducts. So that's essentially all of the foods that are discarded from the human food chain. So anything that's at the slaughterhouse that's not fit for human consumption. And that can be just because humans don't find it palatable, but it often is because it's being excluded from the human food chain for other more sinister reasons. So perhaps the animal was dead on arrival, or it was heavily diseased, or it was dying, and it could also be contaminated with heavy metals or other toxic poisons. And so that's what's ending up in this bag of food, and that's just some of the reasons why we don't recommend kibble type diets at the Natural Vets. If you want to know more about the many other reasons why we don't recommend processed kibble, on our website we've got a little ebook which is a very comprehensive source of information about processed pet foods, and so you can download that from the shop area. It's called The Problems with Processed Pet Foods, and it's just a $5 donation which all goes to charity. So what are the alternatives? Well, certainly you can make a homemade diet yourself. If you consult with a holistic vet, they can usually give you very good nutritional guidance about what kinds of foods are healthy for your dog or your cat. There's also lots of pre-packaged foods on the market these days that are a lot more transparent about what's going into their food, and they use ingredients that dogs and cats are actually designed to eat. So I've got some examples with me today, and these are some of the brands that we stock at the Natural Vets. So one of the brands would be Organic Paws, and so this food is one that's suitable for both dogs and cats, and if you look at the back here it tells you exactly what they're putting in here. So they use lamb meat and chicken meat, and they tell you the exact cuts of the meat that are going in there. There's liver and kidney and heart and green tripe as the organ meat components. So they're very specific. They're not just saying vaguely there's some byproducts in there. They don't really know it's rendered and cooked. They're actually using raw, good quality, healthy sources of meat and organ meat. They also put some ground bone in there and turmeric and coconut oil, and that's it. So very species appropriate food for dogs and cats. Another option would be the Complete Pet Company's patties, and so they make both a dog and a cat food, and I've got the cat example here. And so to let you know what goes into this food, it's 100% grass-fed beef and free-range kangaroo with some hemp oil, coconut oil, chia seeds, and a nutritional supplement that Jenny makes herself that includes taurine and meets all the nutritional targets when it comes to the vitamins and minerals required. So again, very transparent, and you know exactly what's going into the pet food. Another option would be Proudy, and so this one isn't organic, whereas the first two I discussed are, but it is human grade, so it's still very good quality. And again, you look at the ingredients and they tell you exactly what they're putting into their food. There's nothing vague, it's all very specific. You can see from their listing that it's good quality and they know exactly what they're doing. All of these companies are very transparent, so you can call them and ask them more about their food. Ask them about what they're putting in there, why they're putting it in the food, where did they source it from, how are the animals handled on the farms. Most of these pet food companies have actually visited all the farms that they source their ingredients from, and so they know a lot more about the ethical side of farming, and so that's one of the reasons why we stock these brands as well. Some of the other brands that we stock would be Wowanelli. That's a food that's produced down in Brisbane, and it's a wonderful, complete and balanced diet as well. We also have the Raw for Paws food, which is a great choice that's made locally here on the Sunshine Coast. And then we do carry the Canine Country Holistic Boar food. So that's one that's more of a barf style food, so it's got the muscle meat from feral caught pigs, as well as some fruits and vegetables and other sources of fibre in there. Then when it comes to shelf-stable foods, there's also much better options than a processed kibble diet. So the brands that we stock and recommend are Ziwi Peak and Frontier Pets. Ziwi Peak make a canned and an air-dried food for both dogs and cats, and Frontier Pets have got a great range of treats as well as a complete freeze-dried food for dogs. And so there's some options if you need a shelf-stable food. Perhaps you're travelling or you're going away for a weekend, your pet's going into a kennel, or for whatever reason you need a shelf-stable version of a raw diet at this point in time. So that is a good summary of why we recommend these kinds of foods. Healthy ingredients, very transparent, you know exactly what's in there, and they're all foods that your pet is designed to eat, compared to something like this that is shelf stable for months and it's supposed to be a meat product. And just think about that for a second. If you left a steak out on your counter for months on end, I don't think you'd be wanting to feed it to your dog after that time. So there's a lot more going into that bag of pet food than what they're disclosing on the label. If you want to know any more about that, you can Call the clinic, book in for a dietary consultation with one of our vets. You can also browse our website. There's lots of information on there about how to feed your pets a real raw diet. And we also periodically run 7 webinar series, and part of the webinar series is always dedicated to the Raw Diet Foundation for Dogs and Cats. Any more information on that, just email the clinic, hello@thenaturalvets.com.au, and our nursing team will get back to you. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.